the idea of going for walks. And we talked about this when we first kicked it off, like just being a little bit more active has made a huge difference in our lives, and in our clients' lives. And there is some cool research on this. So if you guys know that we like love Dr. Huberman, so we're gonna quote him again. One of the things about walks that's so great, so using his words, forward ambulation, aka moving forward, so walking. But forward ambulation could be biking, right? Like it could be other things, but walking is probably going to be a little bit easier. First thing in the morning, we talk about doing morning walks, right? Like part of it is like for the sun exposure, but part of it is this forward ambulation. First thing decreases activity in the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that detects fear and like threat perception. So, you know, obviously that's going to have you more anxious and a little just more on edge. And you're also able to experience optic flow, which creates changes to the nervous system. So again, just really positive ways to set your, you know, nervous system up in a way first thing in the morning that you are less stressed. You are still alert and focused, but you're not like pushed past that anxious. And that's something that he talks about a lot, is like the idea of like being alert and focused, but not like too stimulated.
Yeah, and optic flow means just the passing of objects like through, like past your eyesight.
So like walking and biking are both really good ways to accomplish this. And if you can time it with an outdoor situation, which is now getting you to like see obviously like nature and sunlight. And I know we mentioned this before, but like it doesn't, like even if it's like cloudy, it doesn't seem like it's that bright out. It is still significantly brighter than being inside doing that. Like, and even if like, you know, you're in the gym with like your little light over you, like that's not going to be as bright as like outside.
Yeah.
So I would definitely recommend like just an easy way for people to get more steps is to just go for these walks. And they also have these other benefits of helping set your circadian rhythm, and help you just feel more like alert but calm instead of so anxious. And I don't know, I mean, I'll wake up sometimes and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm like so flustered. And the last thing that I want to do is like go for a walk. But like literally if I don't give myself that option, it's like I wake up, you know, wash my face, do whatever, maybe do some emails, and then I'm like, okay, getting moving, I feel so much better. Like it literally sets the tone. Like a 10-minute walk outside literally changes things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to also point out that it's going to be better if you can get direct sunlight as well. Like it's a lot brighter than it coming in through a window. Because I know some people are like, will go to work in the morning and like they're by a window and that's their sun exposure. But it would be a lot better if you could maybe get up a little bit earlier, try to get outside.
And understandably, it can be hard with certain timing. That's why I have that like lamp, like that light on my bathroom counter. It's like happy light or something, I don't know. And it's made for like, you know, when it's like really dark out, and obviously like light is associated with mood. So I just have it on there that I'll just turn it on like when I'm getting ready. And it's certainly not as bright as going outside, but again, it's something. And I find that helps like a ton. So just going for walks, we've talked about those benefits for you know, kind of like again, mood, alertness, circadian rhythm, but also that's just a really, really easy way to get in these steps. And it's doesn't really matter. You can do that anywhere. It's cost free. It literally all it takes is your time, and it doesn't need to be that long either. You don't need to go for you know, a 45-minute hike somewhere like amazing. Like just get outside and go for 10 minutes. Like, around your block. Like that's all you need to do. I think a lot of times we hear stuff like this and we like get overwhelmed with like, oh, this seems like so much to do. It's like, no, it's really actually easy, especially if you break it down. Like if you were to tell somebody to like do something for 30 minutes straight, that's a lot more of an ask versus like, hey, let's do it for 2 to 3 times for 10 minutes at like different time points. Like that's a lot easier to accomplish because we all have like little sandwiches of time that like we can do stuff, but like 30 minutes like in one chunk is a lot harder than like 3 10-minute chunks. So why not do that instead? No,
absolutely.
Now, another interesting thing about just kind of like activity is this idea of NEAT. So non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And this is actually, I read this paper years ago and I absolutely love it. I just think it's so interesting. I did highlight where what they said NEAT was, just so there was like the their working definition.
Yeah. And as NEAT is becoming a bit more like quote unquote popular, I would say there's a lot more research coming out on NEAT as just having quite a significant impact on overall like caloric expenditure and its impact on body composition, which just looking at it face value, it's like, okay, what is me fidgeting, going for a 5-minute walk like gonna do? But it really does add up over time in terms of just your ability to maybe maintain a set point or a certain body composition that you're comfortable with. And I really like that this is becoming a quote unquote thing that's being researched because it's so easy. Like I don't have to like run a marathon every day, you know?
No.
Like you just have to go for some walks or set a timer for 5 minutes every 2 hours, like just to get up if you are at a 9-to-5 desk job. Yeah.
So there was a study and they took, now it's a small study, but still pretty interesting. There were 16 non-obese adults and for 8 weeks they ate in 1,000 calorie surplus. So like that's a pretty hefty surplus.
Yeah.
Like they're eating good. And what was really interesting about this was that the fat gain varied tenfold amongst the volunteers. And meaning that like the gain ranged from 0.36 kilos to 4.23 kilos. That's really interesting. Like that's like a really big variability. Like that's like a lot. So they're all overfed the same amount. Mm-hmm. So what is contributing here? This was the definition I did highlight. So NEAT is the thermogenesis that accompanies physical activities other than volitional exercise, such as activities of daily living, fidgeting, spontaneous muscle contraction, maintaining posture when not recumbent, etc. So literally anything that like, you know, if you're really animated when you're talking and like you're just kind of moving around and like, oh, let me go up and get this. And we've all been in places, especially if you have been dieting, where you're like, I'll just get it later.
Yeah, right? Or you're like leaning on things more rather than like actually actively standing.
Or not like being like expressive when you're talking. Like if that's like your norm, like that's my norm. Obviously anybody that's ever spoken to me knows that. And then when I get like very deep into a diet, like I'm still expressive, but not nearly as much. So it is like, it's all dependent on your baseline, right? Like if you aren't, you know, you don't have a lot of NEAT, then it's not really going to change that much. But if you are high NEAT, this is something interesting. So there have been some studies where they showed that this was like, you know, has shown a lot of these individual differences between weight gain. So what they found here was that NEAT proved to be the principal mediator of resistance to fat gain with overfeeding. The average increase in NEAT, which was 336 calories a day, accounted for 2/3 of the increase in daily energy expenditure. And the range of NEAT in our volunteers was large. It went from -98 to plus 692 calories per day. However, most importantly, changes in NEAT directly predicted resistance to fat gain with overfeeding, and this predictive value was not influenced by starting weight. So literally the range here was so vast between like the fat gain being very low to kind of, you know, significantly high. I mean, that's like 10 pounds in 8, like that's pretty significant weight gain. And going from like virtually like negative calories expended to like almost 700, like that's like a huge range. And part of this, like they said, is going to be like genetic, right? Like some people just naturally do this more, but knowing that this literature exists and knowing that what we're talking about, you can make an effort to, not saying you need to like start fidgeting, like you don't need to listen to this and be like, oh my gosh, I need to fidget more. Like you don't need to do that if that's not what you naturally do, but just go for a walk. Or like Karina said, like set a timer if you really need to, or if you just drink more water, you'll have to get up and go to the bathroom. And stuff like that. Like it really does make a difference. Park a little bit farther, taking the stairs, like.
Yeah, it's so funny when you talk about it being genetic, because I like truly believe that. My dad makes a joke all the time that like it's gotta be a Noboa thing, because anytime like any of us has a day off, we're like, all right, I gotta like fix something around the house, or I gotta like clean something. Like we just like can't like relax, which is double-edged sword. But I definitely feel that way. Like if I'm just laying by the pool on a Sunday, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go crazy. Like I have to move around.
Yeah, even if it's like I gotta get up and go in the pool, and then I gotta like get out, and then I gotta like walk around.
Yeah. But yeah, and that's
or even like when we went to Orlando, we were like, oh, we're gonna go to Starbucks, and it was like a 10-minute walk. Like we didn't need to walk there. We could have easily drove there, but we're like, oh, we'll just walk.
Yeah.
And like stuff like that, and the elevator broke. Oh.
Yeah, we took so many stairs, but and also like to be empathetic because I spend time with you, and like it's so natural. Like when we hang out together, like, oh, let's take the stairs. Like, oh, let's walk to Starbucks. And I'll hang out with other people, and like a 10-minute walk is like, no, like that's so far. But I would say if you're not one of those people, just start small. Like go for like 5-minute walks, 10-minute walks. Try to take the stairs at least once a day if you're someone who has access to an elevator. But that's a super interesting study. I really love it when like science can like clearly lay it out, like, hey, like this has a pretty significant impact in a more controlled setting. Like, I mean, 1,000 calorie surplus.
Now, this is a small study. It's not like it's, the end all be all, but it's something that the mechanism makes sense. We see it in practice, and okay, cool. There's also a study to back this up.
Yeah.
It was just so vast. Like what I just appreciated about this study was one, that it was not, the weight gain was not affected by their starting weight. That's interesting because obviously you would think, okay, that might influence some of it. It makes logical sense that like higher NEAT would protect against gaining more. But it still is interesting to see such a robust difference. Like if you're looking at just the average, you say, okay, what is the average increase? But then when you look at like actually the low end and the high end, that's what's just so interesting to me. Is like how different that really is.
Yeah. And then circling this back to fitness trackers as kind of like a feedback mechanism is like, I think that's what's so great about them. Like I know some people can like demonize it as being like very obsessive, but I think it's a really great way to encourage us throughout the day to move more as something that like changes our behavior. So there is a study going on at USF. I don't know. I do know that I can share this because it is public information. I don't know any of the data, so I wouldn't be sharing that. No, it's like currently in progress. But it's a study looking at behavioral changes in obese patients with a CGM. So if they can see their blood glucose levels throughout the day, how does that change their food choice? Yeah. And so that's something, when I can afford it down the road, that I would love to be able to do for a little bit. But they are super pricey right now.
Oh, they are.
And I'm like, I'm fine with the ring for right now.
They are so expensive. And it was just not. I mean, I had thought about that too, just out of pure curiosity.
Yeah.
But I could never with jujitsu.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That worked.
Yeah, and I actually talked to a friend who has done like all of the biohacking devices, and I was like, between a CGM and a ring, because she has both, and she was like, honestly, because you eat so healthy, you'd probably get bored looking at the CGM because you eat pretty consistently after the first 2 weeks, whereas the Oura Ring, it's a little bit cooler to kind of see those changes as your life changes.
And if you really wanted to, you could just use a glucometer more.
Right.
I mean, it's not the same thing.
It's not continuous.
Obviously. Right. But because you don't have diabetes, it's not at like a life-threatening situation where you have a little bit more leeway. If you really wanted to nerd out, you could take your blood every hour if you wanted to.
But I'm super excited to see how this study pans out. It's like a 2-year study.
Nice.
So they're going to be looking at just how people viewing their CGMs changes the way they live, the way they eat, how they move. And so I think there is going to be like the research on behavioral changes due to fit trackers and all those things is going to be really interesting. And I'm obviously a huge proponent for it. Like it definitely changes my life and how just to have something like reminding me.
Yeah, it's kind of like a coach, right? It's like you have that accountability, like, okay, I'm going to check in with somebody every week. And not saying that that's the reason why you make those changes, but it is certainly useful when you are like thinking like, oh, maybe I, don't want to do this, but like, all right, I know this is like making me work towards my goals. So this is kind of like one of those things that you can have just, whether it's a wearable or just on your phone. In Mass, actually literally I was reading it this morning, there was a new study that just came out, I guess just this year, so recently, about food trackers and like did that increase the prevalence of eating disorders, right? Because obviously there is the potential for that.
Right.
And there's been some observational studies that have shown that there's a higher incidence of, you know, eating disorders and disordered eating tendencies, which that kind of gets murky, like what does that actually mean? Because there's different operational definitions, but there can be some issues with those, right? And observational data.
I mean, even the definition for eating healthy now is like
all of that.
So I saw a post the other day where it was like,
what does that mean?
as soon as I like something that someone posted like a meme saying that because I don't eat junk food, everyone assumes that I'm on some sort of diet. Like that's how eating healthy, like how foreign eating healthy is. Like that's just so crazy to think about.
Yeah, or the idea that like if you have a little bit of something that is like something that's sweet, like now you're not eating healthy. You're like, wait, why can't we have both things?
Yeah, or because I don't order like a bun with every burger. Like everyone's like, oh, you're on a diet.
You're like, no,
I just
didn't want that.
Like, yeah, I'm just trying to like balance my lifestyle for when I have ice cream later. Like, so
we're gonna be eating something later, and we don't need to have this shitty bun.